Well, thank you for meeting with me today.
You're very welcome.
So, if you don't mind, Adam, if you would introduce us, kind of tell us who you are and what you do, that'd be great.
My name is Adam Berry. We are at PVCC right now, where I am a full-time lecturer and professor. And in addition to that, I have my own sports psychology practice called Mindset Sports Psychology.
Nice. So, how did you get into sports psychology? What interested you about
I
that?
used to be a soccer coach, first
Ah,
soccer player, then I became a soccer coach,
okay.
and
So coaching.
came to America in my mid-20s to coach and manage professional teams.
Nice.
And during that time, I did all the coaching courses.
Okay.
And I felt that I had a good grip on the X's and O's part, but wasn't particularly familiar enough with the psychology part. How does
Ah,
psychology help the athlete, and how can a good psychology make the athlete a better athlete?
better. Okay.
So I started reading books, and I
Hmm.
found that I was very interested in it, and I thought, if I'm going to read this many books, I may as well get a qualification. And
Okay.
so I went back to school a few years ago
Neat.
and got my master's, and then went from there.
Oh my gosh, how neat. Okay, so you teach full time and you have your own practice.
Exactly.
Okay, so tell us about your practice if you don't mind. So how do you meet with athletes? How can you help them?
I
Maybe without, you
s-
don't have to tell us any
no,
specific strategies.
I started about 5 years ago.
Okay.
Mindset sports psychology, and I put myself out there. I worked with the SEC baseball team early on, trying to help some of their players,
Mm.
and they went to the World Series. So I take complete
Yay.
credit for that.
Yeah, well deserved.
Has nothing to do with the coaches at all. Um, had great experience working with them,
Nice.
and it's largely word of mouth. I'm on the web searches as well, so if people look up. But I work with teams. I'm working right now with the ASU women's soccer team,
Nice.
and I work with individuals who come and see me, and anywhere from established professionals
Ooh.
to 11, 12-year-olds,
Oh my gosh.
and everyone in between.
Oh, that's great. So you can't even help all ages.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so if somebody wanted to get into that, what qualifications are needed?
The first thing you do is you get your master's in psychology, and preferably with a major in sports psychology, which was
Oh,
what I did. And then
okay.
you can go the PhD route if you like. It's
Okay.
not essential,
Okay.
because you don't have to be a licensed psychologist,
Oh,
which
okay.
is what someone who would have their PhD would become.
Okay.
You would essentially be a sports psychology consultant
Oh, I see,
with a
I see.
master's. But a master's, if I found that if you do your master's, then that's as much of the subject of
Okay.
sports psychology that you're probably going to learn.
Okay, to work with athletes
Athletes,
specifically.
exactly.
Okay, yeah, teaching
No, if you
specialty,
want to,
you might be different.
yes,
But
if you want to get a PhD in psychology, then that obviously will help you become better at psychology,
yeah.
but it isn't essential.
Okay, great. Okay, and so you don't have to be licensed. Is there a test that you have to take at the end, anything like that?
No, well,
Not
apart from getting your master's
right.
in the subjects that you are doing.
Okay, that's great. So, what do you like about that, and what do you not like about
Well, I've
working
always
with?
been in athletics,
Mm,
so it was always something that I was interested in.
nice,
Um,
exciting.
yeah, I think if you can do a job which you are interested in,
Ah,
then it's the old thing that you never work a day in your life, and I think
right.
that's sort of apt for this. That I've always been involved in athletics. There was a point where I could no longer play them because I got old and injured.
Oh.
I became a coach, and this morphed into sports psychology, and I will
Neat.
still continue to coach.
Okay.
But the sports psychology is something that I really enjoy.
Okay. Do you have a favorite story you could share with us? Any particular?
Um,
You mentioned the World Series for
well,
baseball.
I did work with a pitcher, and this is a story that I tell quite often to students and to
Okay.
clients. Um, I had a client who was a baseball pitcher who was fantastic until he walked a batter.
Ah, okay.
And once he walked a batter, he would walk the next one and the next one and the next
Oh
one
dear.
until the coaches had to say, "I'm sorry, but you're out." They gave him the hook.
Wow.
And no one could really understand this because he was fantastic
Oh,
up until he walked a batter.
wow.
So what changed?
Huh.
And we worked out that a lot of it was due to his dad being his coach. And we talked about that relationship, and he said anytime I made a mistake, he wouldn't talk to me for 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
So it's a quite an obvious relationship between making a mistake and then, how he felt about making mistakes. And he just couldn't handle it. And as he got older, it got worse and worse, and the higher up he went, and he went very high.
Oh, geez.
So we sort of decided that between the two of us that we would try and establish a relationship between him and what a mistake meant.
Okay.
And I work with athletes a lot on mistakes because I don't
Okay.
see mistakes as a negative.
Okay.
I ask the athletes, name an athlete who doesn't make a mistake. And they
Right.
can't, because every one of us makes mistakes.
Nice.
Regardless of, if you're the best in your sport, you still make mistakes. And I
Ah.
say, when a coach stops you and corrects you, what have you just done that made him do that? I said, made a mistake. I said, right. So can we agree that mistakes are an opportunity to learn,
Uh-huh.
and we're going to make them? They said, yes.
Oh, great.
And I go, right, okay, well then, let's look at mistakes as an opportunity to get better.
Oh, nice.
And there's a great quote which I learned, which is, you make a mistake once, it's a mistake. You make a mistake twice, it's a decision.
Oh.
So a mistake's fine if you make it and you learn from it, and then you don't make it again.
Okay.
But it's if you keep making the same mistake over and over again,
Oh, wow.
it's the problem. So when
Huh.
I work with athletes on mistakes, don't look at it as this negative, which was sort of conditioned to think
Right.
a mistake's very bad, I shouldn't make mistakes, if I make a mistake I'm a failure, and
Right.
anxiety increases and self-confidence goes down, but use them as an opportunity to improve. And
Wow.
we go through a checklist of how they think, and but it's look at them as opportunities,
Nice.
and then be better as a result of making a mistake than you
Okay.
were before.
That's
And
great.
then your self-confidence goes up, the anxiety goes down, the stress
Yes.
goes down, and self-belief goes up.
Wow.
So don't look at mistakes. Don't look at failure as a negative. Look at it as an
Okay.
opportunity to learn and improve.
And that's probably very applicable to life, like not
It
even
really
just
is. I mean, sports. Whether I'm dealing with athletes or performers or CEOs, or it's performing, and we sort of perform all
Sure.
the time.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, so talk about a little guy with me. Is there anything you don't like about your career?
Sometimes parents will call me up
Oh.
and they will say, my son or my daughter, who is 13 years old, for example, is struggling with anxiety. And I'm thinking, okay. And then they bring said child to me, and I said, so how do you feel about being here? He said, I only found out 15 minutes ago.
Oh my goodness.
I struggle with that because this is not the child's decision. This is the parent going, right, we're going to see someone, and
Yeah.
and so now I'm very clear that anytime a parent calls me, I'll say, look, I'm happy to meet with you and your child, but you've got to get them to sign off on this. I can't have,
Sure.
So I try and minimise it. It still happens occasionally.
Okay.
I did have a situation where a parent brought their son to me. He was 16, 17. Evidently didn't want to be there. Wasn't enthusiastic the entire time.
Oh dear.
Just sort of laughed and messed about. And I said, well, okay, we'll call it a day. The mum came in and said, look, this is what happened. And she just gave me a scathing review on how appalling I was. So, okay,
Oh my goodness.
So,
Yeah.
it usually isn't the athlete. It's sometimes the people
The
bringing the athletes
parents.
that.
Right.
But I try and minimise that as much by having lived and learned, having made mistakes and learned from them.
Wow. Okay. So you kind of talked about definitely some impacts you've had on athletes. Can you kind of summarize for us, how do you make a difference in athletes' lives?
It's I after a couple of years of doing this, I thought, how can I even more get to the issue?
Uh-huh.
And if we, and learning about it, I realised that the issue is not in our consciousness. You have your conscious mind and your subconscious mind.
Okay.
We know that it exists. We know that we're struggling with anxiety or stress or whatever it is, but we don't know why.
Okay.
And the reason why is in our subconscious. We're not aware of it.
Okay.
So I thought, well, okay, well, if that's the case, how do I get to the subconscious?
Right.
And so I studied hypnotherapy.
Oh.
And I did about 150 hours of courses of becoming an established certified hypnotherapist.
Okay.
And so when I see clients, I will combine psychological skills training with a hypnotherapy session.
Okay.
So we talk about it, we understand it, and then I will incorporate that into the hypnosis.
Wow.
That I know. So I get to the subconscious, I get to the root of the problem, which is the trigger, and say, now we can get rid of that and replace it with something more positive.
Wow.
So we get rid of the negativity and the negatives and replace them with positives.
Cool. So you're not even just like, I guess you could call it putting a Band-Aid on, you're actually like fixing the
Because there's no point in putting a Band-Aid on.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
I would be being unfair, I'd be stealing their money. There's no point. And in the same way that sometimes just hypnotherapy isn't enough, you need to marry the two.
Okay,
So they know what they have things that they know they have to do, these skills, and then they have a lot of the rubbish that they've collected has been let go.
Which could be traumas that they've experienced.
Exactly,
and all kinds of stuff.
with coaches, exactly. I mean, and the good thing about hypnotherapy is you don't actually know, you don't need to know the reason behind why you struggle. You can just go, right, okay, let it go.
Wow. Oh.
So once I did that, I became, I think, more effective with being a sports psychologist, because I can talk to them plus get to the root.
Right. So, and which again probably applies to not just sports, but their lives.
Well, it does,
and
And people come to me just for the hypnotherapy for giving up smoking or stress or weight loss or phobias and things like that. So I do a bit of that as well.
Wow.
But mainly I did it to help me with the sports psychology practice, and it has massively.
Oh, that's great. Wow. Okay. Do you recommend your career? I mean, do you think, like, should students today think about going into your career, or do you think like there won't be enough jobs because it's just too saturated or anything like that?
If it interests you, do it.
Okay.
You know, it's one of those where it's not necessarily easy to make it a lucrative living off the bat.
Okay.
It takes time.
Okay.
And sometimes,
you know,
it really does. The thing with sports psychology is, even though it is getting better and more understood, there is still a stigma to, an athlete doesn't want, the last thing an athlete wants to look is weak.
Right.
And there's still an element of, well, if I need my head examined, then I am weak, I am. And actually, when I'll meet with the team, I'll meet with someone who isn't very enthusiastic, who's been brought by their parents, and I'll say, what percentage is to make you successful at your sport? What is the percentage of that you need to train physically, and how much of it is the mental? And they'll say something like maybe 50-50 or even 60-70% mental. And I say, okay, what percentage of the time that you train is dedicated to the physical part, and how much is dedicated to the mental part? And they say 100% physical and no.
Sure.
So at that point, they go, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
And I say, I'm the mental bit. I'm the, I'm the
really
bit that helps you with the mental part, which is, how do I cope in a pressure situation? Because we literally use two different parts of the brain. If the frontal lobe, which is your consciousness, is your sort of human analytical bit. It's the bit that we use all the time, that we're using now.
Okay.
You're aware. Your the muscle memory, where you say swinging a golf club or swinging a baseball bat, is in your motor cortex, which is another part of the brain.
Oh.
So that motor cortex controls muscle memory.
Okay.
So when you are in a pressure situation and you start thinking about the outcome, what happens if I miss? What happens if this? And what happens? You're now using the analytical part of the brain, not the muscle memory.
Oh my gosh.
So you cease to play naturally.
Oh.
So the essence of what I believe I do is it is execution versus outcome. We want to focus on execution, not outcome. And what we tend to do is think outcome.
Okay.
And what happens if? Am I going to lose? What happens if, what happens if I lose this point? What happens if I walk this batter? What happens if I throw another, what happens if I strike out or miss the putt or miss the cut? So we keep thinking about that, which isn't effective. We've got to stay in the moment.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow. So you can definitely impact many people.
And that's
great.
essentially,
Okay.
if I help an athlete anything, it comes down to stay in the moment, stay calm. I ask a lot of athletes, if you were to play in competition the way you practice, how well would you do? And they said, I'd be amazing.
Right.
Well, then what's changed? And that's when we sort of go, okay, then we need to get you to play in the same way because they're great in practice.
Sure.
But sometimes in competition, and that's a lot of things. It's the interference, it's the analysis, it's the paralysis by analysis. So if we can get them to stop thinking,
right.
which is really what we need to do, is get them to stop thinking. The less they think, the better. Because at that point, they're good.
Right.
They know what they're doing.
Okay.
The more they think about it, the less good they are.
Wow.
So get them to stop
Interesting.
thinking.
That's interesting. Wow. Do you have any life advice for our students? Anything just outside of career? Just how to be happy?
Find out what you enjoy. Find out what you're good at. I think I was a head coach for a number of years. I enjoyed it, but I found that I was putting far too much stress on myself.
Okay.
And I think I realised quite correctly that I'm probably a better assistant coach
Okay.
than I possibly am a head coach.
Okay.
Because it's a different mindset.
Okay.
And so find out what you are good at. Find out what you're suitable for.
Okay.
Don't think that you have to be X if you're not. And follow that road and you'll be much happier.
Okay.
And I think happiness is important. The older I get, the more I sort of realise, the happier you are, the better life you have.
Right. Wow. That's great. Very profound. Is there anything else about sports psychology that you think you'd like to share with students we haven't covered already?
Not that I can think of.
No?
Have a love of sports. Have a love of helping people.
Okay.
Do the work, understand it. Not just psychology, but also, how the brain works and things like hypnotherapy. I felt if I've done one thing right, it's I've sort of expanded what I look at, and how I approach it. And with experience comes knowledge. So.
Yay. If anybody wants to contact you about maybe more questions about the career,
they can email me,
Okay.
mindsetsports@ymail.com.
Okay.
So they
And
can,
I'll put that on
they can contact me through that. Easiest way.
Wonderful. Thanks. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I
You're
really
very
appreciate
welcome.
that. Appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.
Fascinating. Thank you, DJ, for being a good boy.
Yes, he was superb. He's on the phone.
Right.